Hey everyone, so I wanted to show you this technique for making book covers. It's an oldie but a goodie, and it's called the Crackle paint effect. So I did these two last night, and just to give you an idea of what the final product will look like, and the one that I'm showing right now, I actually used more glue, and that'll make sense a little bit later on. That's black gesso on the backs of those covers, and I used this black gesso by Bob Ross. So I gesso the surface first so that the acrylic paint that goes on top will adhere to it better, and it'll make it more long lasting. Now for last night's project, I did use the last of my chipboard. So today I'm going to be using a cereal box, and it'll work pretty much the same way. What I started off by doing was picking out a fairly large cereal box. So you're going to need some Elmer's plain white school glue. For this, I used the Momenta stencil paint that I got at Hobby Lobby on clearance a little while back. It's in a copper color. And then just choose some acrylic paints that you want. You could use distress paint like I just showed you. I have a couple of Jane Davenport paints out. Really any type of acrylic paint that you want. And then of course you're going to need gesso. You can use white or clear gesso as well. So first of all, you just want to cut out one of the skinny sides of the box. And it's a little bit awkward, but just try to cut as close to the edge as you can. Because what I've found is that I often will make covers and I think that they're large enough for all the stuff I'm going to put in them, but for junk journals, it's always good to make the covers larger, I've found. That way you can always cut it down to be smaller later on, but you can't really make it bigger without a lot of trouble. So now I'm just using a paper trimmer. Mine needs new blades, so you'll see me struggle through this quite a bit, but if you have a good paper trimmer with newer blades on it, this will go pretty smoothly. So you can see my paper trimmer is struggling. Basically, I'm just going around and around the box and cutting it as close as I can to the original dimensions so that, like I said, I can still keep it as large as possible and still get the clean cuts on all sides. So parts of this I sped up. Hopefully it doesn't go too fast for you. You could always use the settings while you're watching the video to slow it down or pause at any point if it's getting confusing. And then if you have any stray little bits that are not cut completely, like it'll leave tiny little bits sometimes, especially with my trimmer, like I said, you know, it's an older blade. You can just clean it up a little bit with scissors. And so now I'm taking the black gesso and I'm using a large flat paintbrush. And the first thing I noticed on this surface versus the chipboard that I used last night, the chipboard accepted the gesso a lot better because it's porous, and of course cereal boxes have a little bit of that like a coating on them that makes them a little bit glossy. So the gesso still works fine on this, but you will have like a little bit more trouble getting it to go even. Just make sure you have plenty of gesso on hand when you start this, because for any little empty spots, you definitely want to have enough to cover the entire inside and outside covers. And you just want to make sure to let the gesso thoroughly dry. So I'm just letting this side dry first, and then I'll do the inside. And it always helps to get into those little crevices with the gesso. It also helps your cover be a little bit stronger, because the gesso will just make your book cover more durable, especially where the book cover creases. So now I'm just finishing up on the inside, and since the inside is cardboard, it does take the gesso a lot more quickly and smoothly. And I just wanted to mention that when you're drying the gesso, it's best to let it air dry or dry in front of a fan rather than using a heat tool, because the heat tool can make the gesso bubble. So now I'm showing you the Momenta stencil paint. This is a very thick paint, and it's called No Drip. And I'm just showing a couple of other examples of metallic paints that you could use. You could use that Ranger or any type of craft metallic paint. I just wanted to show you how the Momenta works, because I used it for the first time last night and I really liked it, and it dries really fast. So little goes a long way. That's why I'm using the jar here to thin it out a little bit. And this part, you don't have to be too precise. You can let some of the gesso show through, because in the end result, as long as you have it mostly covered in the metallic, that's what will show through. And I found this works best if you just paint in one direction. So as much as you can with the glues and the paints, just try to go up and down like this, because that'll give it more of a naturally aged look. Okay, so for the glue part, I wanted to show you the difference between these two covers. The one on the right, I used a lot more glue, and the one on the left was less glue. So you basically want to use glue enough that it covers the entire surface, but depending on how much glue you use, the wider the cracks will be. So this time I'm going for kind of a medium between the two. And I'm just doing one section at a time, since the glue will start to dry somewhat quickly, and you want it to still be tacky when you put the next coat of paint on top. So again, I am, as much as I can, trying to keep the glue painted in one direction, and that's up and down. If you wanted more of kind of a willy-nilly look, you could definitely paint in different directions and see what kind of effects you could get that way. So now I just put some of the burgundy acrylic paint, and I'm going to add a little bit of distress paint in antique linen. And Again, you could use really any kind of acrylic paint that you want. This is going to be the dominant color, and I liked adding the distress paint because it thins out the paint somewhat and it spreads out smoother. The only type of acrylic paint I probably would avoid with this type of look is like a high glossy paint, because that might not look vintage enough. So you just start to paint in sections, again going in the direction that you want the cracks to go, and you want to be pretty liberal with the paint. And it's okay that the glue and the paint start mixing on your paintbrush. That doesn't matter, it won't affect the end result. And even though I'm applying the dark pink color pretty liberally, I still like a little bit of the underneath and the black gesso to show through. So in some spots you can see where it's less opaque. I think that just kind of adds to the overall vintage effect. So you can really do that however you like. You could make it very opaque, and that's fine too, because you'll still get the effects of the crackling and the metallic paint will still show through. So one thing that happened in this case is that on the right hand side, you can already see here how it's starting to crack already as it dries. And that one was going fine because I was just letting it naturally dry. What I did on the left though, you could look at it as a happy accident, you could look at it as something you would want to redo. I did use a heat tool on the left side to see what would happen. And you can see on the right side that's showing right now, that came out well. On the left side though, where it got heat, there were some tiny little bubbles and there was less cracking, although it still looked cracked and aged. So that's really up to you. That's the left side right there showing in the picture. So it's really up to you which effect you're going for. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.